We are on Dalet Amud Beis, the last line of the Amud. Taner Rabbanan. The Rabbanan learned. Dinim Amanis B'Shleisha. The Dinim Amanis, monetary disputes, to judge them, have three, you need 3 dayanim. But if you were a mumcha for the rabbim, dan afil yechidi, you could judge even if you're just a single dayan. Rav Nachman said, I could judge dinam amanis b'yechidi, unless someone like me. I could also judge dinam amanis b'yechidi. What were they saying? They were saying that they were considered a mumcha, they knew the halachas, and therefore they were allowed to do it. Fraktais akasha.
Very modest, yeah.
Well, it's not a din of modest. It's someone who's a gadol knows he's a gadol. So they weren't saying, and therefore I'm a better person or whatever. They're saying I'm a mochel rabbin. They would be able to do that. But fraktais akasha, we have a Mishnah of us that says alti hi dan yechidi. Only person who's dan yechidi is Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So Taisa says 2 things. One is that it's an eitzah taiva. It's an eitzah taiva that because maybe you'll make a mistake for myself. It's an eitzah taiva, and the second thing Taisa says is that it could very well be that Rav Nachman and Rav Chia weren't saying that they were done yechidi. They were saying that they were able to be done yechidi, but Maisa they didn't because the Mishnah said alti done yechidi. Could be. So that's what Taisa says. The
they can't learn it, but they want to do it.
Yeah. We asked this last shadow like this. What did Rav Chia and Rav Nachman mean? Do they mean like me, the Gamirna v'Savirna? I learned all the halachas from my Rebbeim, and I know how to Savirna is. I know how to add a svar and to compare one thing to another. So Rav Nachman and Rav Chia had both those attributes, and in additionally, in the Kitna Rishus, they had Rishus from the Reish Kalusa to was the equivalent of the Nasi and Bava, and that's why they were allowed to do it. But if they didn't have Rishus, then the din is not a din. Even if they didn't have Rishus from the Reish Kalusa, the din is a din. Now let's just explain this Gemara.
What's the shadow? Why is there so to say the Reish Kalusa should be the defining factor?
So let me just explain. I'll answer that in a roundabout way. There's 3 things over here in this. There's 3 different statuses. There's somebody who is allowed to judge, and even if he makes a mistake, he does not have to pay back.
Right.
There's somebody who is allowed to judge, and if he makes a mistake, the din is still a din. In other words, the guy who had the money, he said, you're chayiv, you're pater, the chayiv guy gave the pater guy, and then boom, they left, right? So the din is still a din, and the pater guy doesn't have to give the money back, but the Dayan has to, the Baldin who lost the money can go back to the Dayan and say, hey, you owe me money because you messed up. And then the third lowest darga is a Dayan who judges a din and he makes a mistake and it's not considered even a din. That means that it's like they never did it, nobody's chayiv, nobody's pater, they have to return the money to each other and they start again a brand new din. So those are the 3 different categories. So the Gemara is saying over here, by a Reish Kalusa, the Reish Kalusa gives you Rishus. Now, if the Reish Kalusa gives you Rishus, that gives you the right to judge. And the question is gives you a right to judge, and your din is still a din, because if you don't have a right to judge, the din is not a din. So which one is it? So the Gemara says, do you say that, look, you're a Talmid Chacham, you're Gamirna and Savirna, and now you're allowed to judge, and even if you judge, the din will be a din. Yes, you're not a Mumchel Rabbin, you may have to go and return the money to the person who you erroneously awarded it, took it away from, and you may have to do that, but still the din is a din. Or do you say, no, the din is not even a din, it goes back to the way it was before, and then you have another dayan come and judge it. So that's the question. So the Gemara says, Tashma, I'll give you a raya. The Marzutra brother of Nachman, Dandina. Marzutra, the son of Rav Nachman, judged the din. V'tan, he made a mistake. Also, the Kamad Rav Yosef, he came to Rav Yosef and he said, what's the halach? What should I do? Amalei, so Rav Yosef said, Im kiblucha laihu, if they will makabel you to be the dayan, even if you make a mistake, then, like Tisham, you don't have to pay. V'ilai, but if they were makabel you they said no, we want whatever the halach is. We don't want any mistakes here. Whatever the halach is, whatever the Torah says, that's what we want. So if they said like that when they were makabel you as a single dayan, then you have to pay. But did he say you had the hadar dina that the din goes back and it's not like there's never a din Torah? He didn't say that. So Shema Mina, the Gemara says, you see, even though he didn't have rishus because Rav Nachman didn't have rishus, still dina the din is the din Shema Mina. So here you see the Gemara is Paishat Ibai that if you have Gamirna v'Savirna, a person knows the halacha, knows how to learn a new svara, a new halachas from one to the next, then he's allowed to be a dayan yechidi, and the din will stay a din. But if he made a mistake, he will have to reimburse the party he wronged. Rav says, Haiman debayla made the dina. If somebody wants to be a dayan, and if he made a mistake, he wants to be patur, not have to pay, what does he have to do? He has to get rishus from the reish kulusa.
A license.
What? Yeah, and Rashi explains that since you went down to make you went into the position of dayanos with rishus, you don't have to pay.
Remember, it's like a license.
Certification.
It's
right.
doctor,
Right. We're actually going to see some more cases about this in a few minutes.
What?
We're going to see some more cases about the rishus in a few minutes. The Gemara says a shayla like this: Pshita mehach lahacha mehasam lahasam mahani. It's pashat that if the reish kulusa in Bavel, that's mehacha, but the Talmud Bavel, so it's over here in Bavel. So if the reish kulusa in Bavel gives you rishus, you could judge in the whole Bavel. Mehasam lahasam. If the nasi in Eretz Yisrael, right in Eretz Yisrael, there's no reish kulusa, there's a nasi. If the nasi in Eretz Yisrael gives you rishus, then you have rishus there also, right? So if the nasi in Eretz Yisrael gives you rishus in Yerushalayim, you can go down in Tveria. If he gives you rishus in Tveria, you can go in Yerushalayim or in Ramat Beit Shemesh or whatever. It doesn't matter. You can do it. But track the Gemara. And the Gemara says it's pashut also. If you got rishus in the reish kulusa, and you want to go judge in Eretz Yisrael with that rishus and reish kulusa, nami mahani. That also works. The hacha shevet, v'hasam machayking. Over here in Bavel, it's a shevet, and over here in Eretz Yisrael, the nasi is a machayking. What's this Gemara talking about? The Gemara explains. The Tanya. Yep, like the pasuk. The Gemara says.
Pasuk in the Torah.
It's a pasuk in the Torah. Yasser shevet mi
Yehuda.
When the Rebbeinu wrote the Torah, it had lots of nevias in the Torah. The pasuk says, "La Yasser Shevet Yehuda." The shevet is a rod of rulership, like the scepter, right? So it's a lashon of srara. So the shevet won't depart from Yehuda, and the Brisa says, "Ilu Rashi Galishim b'Bavel." These are the Rashi Galias in Bavel, Sharoidin es Yisrael b'shevet that rule Kal Yisrael with the shevet. Mechayki bein raglav, and the support between his legs. That's Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel. That's the grandsons of Hillel Shamlam Torah Barabim that teach Torah and Barabim in Eretz Yisrael. That means that you see that the Brisa is teaching up that shevet in Bavel is more chashav than mechayki in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, if a person has permission from the reish kulusa to judge in Bavel, if he goes to Eretz Yisrael, for sure he could judge over there also. But the Gemara Shaila is going to be, what about the other way? What if a person got rishus from the nasi and he wants to now go to Bavel and do a din in Bavel? Right? So what the Shaila is, does that work? From having rishus from the nasi, does that work to Bavel? Tashma, I'll bring you around like this. The Rav Bar Chana done din of Tah. Rav Bar Chana would judge the din, and he made a mistake. Asal Kama Rab Chia. He came to Rab Chia. Amar lei, ikablucha alayhu loitisham. We're going to see soon, by the way, that Rab Chia was Rab Bar Chana's uncle. Okay, just keep the relationship in mind.
Whose uncle?
Rab Chia was Rabbi Bar Chana's uncle. Rab Chia was the brother of Chana. So Rabbi Bar Chana was his nephew.
So they got the good genes in the family.
Yeah. So the Rabbi Bar Chana done din of Atah. he made him, Rabbi Bar Chana judged the din and he made a mistake. Asal l'kamed Reb Chia, he came in front of Reb Chia. Amar lei, ikiblucha alayu lo tashalim. If they were makabel you, that whether or not you make a mistake, that they're going to accept your din, lo tashalim, you don't have to pay. He lied, but if not, zil shlam, you have to pay. And again, you see that the din is a din, but he can't go and he has to pay reimburse the person who he wronged. V'harab Bar Chana reshus avanakit, and Rav Bar Chana had reshus from Rebbe. We're going to see in a minute. He had reshus from Rebbe. Rebbe was the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael, and Shmamina mihasan lacha leimahani Shmamina. So you see that from over there, since he had reshus in Eretz Yisrael and he was doing a din in Bavel, and he asked Reb Chia what to do, and Reb Chia said you have to pay Shmamina. That you see here that mehasam lachalay mahani Shmamina. You see here that it doesn't help. The reshus from Reb Yehuda and Nasi in Eretz Yisrael didn't help him to pater from paying back the person who he wronged in Bavel. Okay. Practical Gemara of Lay Mahani, it doesn't help. You're telling me that reshus doesn't help? I'll bring you a raya that reshus does help even from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Why? The Rab Bar of Huna ki have a minzi b'hadik beresh glusa. Rab Bar of Huna would have arguments with the house of the Reish Galusa. You find in different times in Gemara, the Reish Galusa didn't necessarily get along with the Rabbanim, the Gedalim of the generation. So apparently, Rab Bar of Huna was one of those people.
Like today, yeah.
Who he and the Reish Galusa didn't get along so well. Amar, he said, I'm not taking reshus. I don't have reshus from you that I have to go and listen to what the Reish Galusa says. I have reshus from my father, Rav Huna. Rav Huna, my father, had reshus from Rav. Rav me Reb Chia, and Rav had from Reb Chia. Reb Chia me Rebbe, and Reb Chia had from Rebbe. Now Reb Chia and Rebbe were in Eretz Yisrael. Right? So you see, he was in Bavel. So you see, he's saying, I have reshus, my yichus of reshus goes back to Eretz Yisrael, so who are you to fight with me? So the Gemara says, no, you have no raya. Why? Because he was just arguing with them. He was just pushing back. It wasn't really saying this wasn't the psak. He was just this was a rhetorical flourish that he was trying to one up them. Practical Gemara, so you're telling me that reshus from Eretz Yisrael doesn't help, right? Then Rab Bar Chana reshus adanaka lamali. Why did Rab Bar Chana bother getting reshus from Rebbe, which we're going to say the story in a second? Before he went to Bavel, it's not going to help him anyway. And for the Gemara, there are cities that are on the border. And for those, the reshus in Eretz Yisrael helps because they still listen. They got news from Eretz Yisrael. They listened to Eretz Yisrael, and they would go. And the reshus would help there.
So where did Bavel start? So wasn't Bavel like Iran, Iraq?
Something like that, yeah.
So what's called the Gluck of Yisrael? They're parts.
There were cities in the Gvul of Bavel somewhere, which were already outside Eretz Yisrael. It could be anywhere in the middle. I don't know where it was, but there were cities where it would have helped, and that's why he did it.
That's called the Gvul.
Yeah. Okay, Zaktim Arvaiter. My Rishusa. What was the story of Rab Bar Chana getting Rishus from Rabbi? Kavanachas Rab Bar Chana l'Bavel. Rab Bar Chana wanted to go down to Bavel. Amar le Reb Chia Rabbi. Reb Chia said to Rabbi, Ben Achi, my nephew, my brother's son, Yera the Bavel is going into Bavel. Yera, can he paskin halachas isser v'heter? So Rabbi answered, Yera, he could paskin halachas isser v'heter.
And that's how it's read.
Yadin, but this is a dialogue. The way it's written in the smicha is right, Yera. But then it's coming from here. But the dialogue was Reb Chia said to Rabbi Yaira, and Rabbi answered Yaira. Reb Chia said Yadin, can he do dinah mamnis? The Rabbi answered Yadin, he could have two dinah mamnis. Yater v'cheres, can he go and say this bachar has a mum and therefore it's mutter yigritzazim, but it's not asr ma'ana as a bachar?
As a bachar
a bachar of a behema tahira that's born is kodesh, right? So the halacha is that you have to bring it to Eretz Yisrael, not to Eretz Yisrael, you bring it to the base of Mikdash and bring it as a carbon bachar. Okay? Now the thing is, though, that once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, what are you going to do with it? If it has a mum, then you could be I think paid it.
You're
So,
safe.
but what are you going to? But how do you decide if it's a mum? If it's a mum that's a mum over that's going to get healed, it doesn't matter. It's not matter that bechar. But if it's a mum that won't heal, then it's possible as a carbon. Then it's matter. So the Gemara, so Reb Chia said to Rabbi, Yater b'chayris, can he go be mater b'chayris? Can Rab Bar Khan be mater b'chayris? So Rabbi said, Yater, he can be mater b'chayris.
So is it Yater b'chayris or is it Asur b'chayris?
Yater b'chayris.
No. Yater means you're making a mutter. But it should be really mean. You're telling them on the b'chayr is good. What you're doing is you're making it no good. So something else of Yater is...
You're making it no good as a b'char, but mutter to use for other things. Right? Because otherwise you can't use it as a b'char either beforehand, because there's no Beis Hamikdash in that time. In the time of Rabbi Danasi, the Beis Hamikdash was already destroyed. So that's why the shaila was, it's going to be usher unless you could be matter it. Right? Otherwise, you're right. You shouldn't be yater. It should be yipasal, right? Pasal. But in those days, it was ready automatically. You couldn't bring it as a carbon. Okay, Rav also went from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, and the Gemara says, "Ki avnachas Rav leBabel." When Rav went to Babel, Amalei Reb Chia l'Rebbe. Reb Chia said to Rabbi, "Ben achaisi, my sister's son, also my sister's son." Not my brother's son, my sister's son. Yered leBabel is going to Babel. Yered, can he paskin a serveter? Rabbi answered, Yered, he can paskin a serveter. Yadin, can he paskin din amamnis? Rabbi says, Yadin, he can paskin din amamnis. Yater b'chayris, can he be mater b'chayris? You know what Rabbi said? Al yater, he cannot do b'chayris. Frak the Gemara is going to say on Amud Beis why Rabbi didn't let him be mater b'chayris. But in the meantime, the Gemara asks, why did Rab Chia call Rav his sister's son and he called Rava his brother's son? So maybe Taka was like that. You have Rav was the sister's son and Rabbi Bar Chana was the brother's son. Where it says no. We learned Eva v'chana v'shelo omarta Rab Chia kulu b'nei Abba Baracha karsla mikafri. You had Eva, Chana, Sheila, and Marta and Reb Chia were the sons of Abba Bar Acha of Karsla of Kafri.
Right, you see what's the most all the boys weren't the best. On Reb Chia's one mentioned the Gemara.
No, well, we're mentioning the other ones right here also. But he was the only one. But look, Ava's mentioned. But the Gemara, but you see that he's the only one who has Rebbe in front of him. So he's the only one who had Smicha.
Right.
So and for the Gemara, Rav Barachua Dahava Bar Achte. Rav was both his brother's son and his sister's son, and we'll explain in a second how that was. Rav Bar Chana Barachua Delav Bar Achte. Rav Bar Chana was the brother's son, but not his sister's son. What happened over here? What happened was that Abba Bar Acha from Karsla, Abba Bar Acha Karsla from Kafri, was the father to these brothers. However, he had two wives at different points in his life. At one point, he was married to one lady, and he had a baby named Avai. And at one point, he was married to a different lady, and he had a baby named Rab Chia. Then it wasn't called Rab Chia when he's a baby; it's called plain Chia when he's a baby, and then it grew up to be Rab Chia. The lady he married, who was Rab Chia's mother, had a different daughter from a different husband from before she married Abba Bar Acha. Okay, so Rab Chia had a half sister who was not related at all to his half brother Avai, who had the same father as him but a different mother. Okay, so just think about it this way. You have Abba Bar Acha had two wives, presumably at different times, and with one wife he had a son Avai, with one wife he had a son Rab Chia. With the same wife who had a son Rab Chia had from a different husband, an earlier marriage, she had a daughter who was Rab Chia's half sister. In the end, Rab Chia's but in the end, Rab Chia's half brother Avai, that means his brother from his father, married his sister from his mother. Rav Chia's half sister was not related to Avai at all. Right? They weren't related. So they married each other, and they had a baby named Rav. So it turned out that Rav was both Reb Chia's sister, half-sister's kid, and Reb Chia's half-brother's kid. That's why he said, for Rav, he said, my sister's son, not my brother's son. Because really, he was both the sister's son and the brother's son. The Gemara says,
Shayla, this is Pasha by Yehuda.
Yeah.
So you find one of the names, it's not a common name.
It's not a common name. Well, it is spelled a little differently over here. Right? The pasuk is spelled Shin Lamed Hey. Yeah. Here it's spelling it Shin Yud Lamed Aleph. Okay, the Gemara, that's one teretz the Gemara says. V'bay Seiman, if you want, you could say another teretz the Gemara says. Al Shem Chachmasai. He called him Bar Achaisi, my sister's son, not because he was literally his sister's son, although he was. The Ksiv, because the pasuk says Emar, because he was a Chacham. Al Shem Chachmasi, because he was a Chacham. The Ksiv, the pasuk says Emar LeChachma Achaisiat. Tell Chachma, tell your wisdom, you're my sister. That means that you want, the pasuk is saying, you should be very close to Chachma. You want to stay close to Chachma.
You married the Torah.
Yeah, but because we use the word achaisi by Chachma, therefore he was complimenting his nephew by saying that he's bar achaisi because he was being meramis that he was a Chacham and mar l'Chachma achaisiyat. So, frak the Gemara, Yater b'cheres al Yater. Reb Chia asked Rebbe if Rav could be mater b'cheres, and Rebbe said al Yater he can't. My time, why? You're going to tell me that Rav wasn't smart enough, he wasn't a wise person enough to know how to be mater b'cheres? How come? The Chacham Tuva. We just said that he was very Chacham. That's why he was mar l'Chachma achaisiyat. He was a big Chacham. So why would you say to him that? Why would Rebbe say that he can't be mater b'cheres? So the Gemara says, no, you're right. He wasn't, it's not that he wasn't a Chacham. Itaka was a Chacham. But even if you're a Chacham, there's certain basic knowledge. If you don't have, you just don't have it. El Misham Glebiki Mumi. You're going to say because he wasn't a Baki in Mumin. No, can't say that either. Rav says, listen to this, okay? 18 months I grew, I stayed next to shepherds. Leda to know Ezamam Kavua Ezamam Iver. Which mum is a Kavua mum and which mum is a mum Iver. In other words, he went to a 1.5 year biology course. Right? So
a zookeeper, yeah.
So don't tell me that Rav didn't know what kind of mum was a kosher mum. Going back to your point before, what kind of mum was a mum that'll be mater a bachar, and what kind of mum is one that is going to be a mum Iver and it's going to go away, and therefore the bachar is not mutter to eat. So the Gemara says, the reason why Rebbe did this was because he wanted, Rabbi Bar Chana had gone down to Babel first, and he wanted that Rabbi Bar Chana should have something to have covered from. And Rav, what? Oh, you're not with me? I'm on base.
No, I'm listening to you. But,
you're listening? Okay. We're about, you see the Ibay Sema with the little aleph, about 8 lines down? We're about to say that. But the reason why Rebbe would not let Rav be mater b'cheres was because he wanted to leave something that Rabbi Bar Chana could do that Rav couldn't do, so that Rabbi Bar Chana should have a little extra kavod, because Rebbe thought that it was appropriate that Rabbi Bar Chana should have a little kavod, and he wasn't worried about Rav's kavod because Rav anyway he knew they were going to be mechabed. So therefore he said that Rav shouldn't be mater b'cheres, but not because Rav couldn't be mater b'cheres. That was one shot. The Gemara says, if you want, you could say no. Mishum hagufe. Because of this that we just said, that Rav was such a baki and mumim, the Rav bakia b'mumi tvei, Rav was such a baki and mumim, v'shari mumi d'loyadi inshi. He's going to be mater mumim that people don't realize are a mum, and therefore they're not going to know the real basis for what he did it. They'll think he did it because of X, but really it was because of Y. V'amri and l'seiki hai gavna shar Rav. This is a case where Rav was mater. And they'll come to be mater a mumayver. In other words, they'll think that this in this situation Rav was mater, and they won't realize that there's some other piece in the animal's body that Rav saw, and that's why he was mater. And then because he's such a baki, they'll misinterpret it, what it is that his rationale was to be mater, and they'll come to be mater b'cheres. So it wasn't because he wasn't right to be mater b'cheres, it was because he was so right to be mater b'cheres, Rebbe was afraid to let him be mater b'cheres. Fine. Zaktim Arvaiter. Yera.
So you find in halacha, a lot of poskim, they themselves will hold the chumrah, but they won't pass it that way.
Yes. And also you find the other way around, that when a Pesach that's brought down in halacha, klalim for a Pesach, that when a Pesach is passing, if he's passing l'kula, and not everyone agrees with that, then the halacha is that the Pesach is supposed to tell the person that he's explaining the rationale why he's saying that. Right? Okay. So the Gemara says, Yera. We said both by Rav and by Rabbi Bar Chana, Rav Chia asked, can he paskin Isser v'heter? And Rabbi answered, he can paskin Isser v'heter. In fact, the Gemara, I don't understand. What does he need Rishus if he knows the halacha? And the Gemara is saying that we said that for a dayan to judge din in Mamanis, you need to have Rishus from Reish Galusa or from the Nasi. But for Isser v'heter, we never said that. So why did he need a Rishus for Isser v'heter? And for the Gemara, because of the Maisa that was. Once happened a story like this. The Tanya learned in a Brisa. One time Rebbe went to a place. He saw people were kneading their doughs with tamei water. In other words, that wasn't really tamei water. They were using tamei kalim, and therefore it would make the dough tamei. Amar lahem, so he said to them, why are you kneading the dough with tumah? Amar lai, so they said, I'll tell you why. Talmud echad balakan, a Talmud came here, v'hiralan, when he paskin, mei bitzam ein machshirin. Water from a swamp is not machshir, does not make something mekabel tama. And therefore, we take the water from the swamp, or a marsh, this may be a better word.
Right. And
therefore, we take that water, and we're using that water to knead the dough, and therefore we don't have to be worried about tama and tara. Right? So, the who made beitzim darashlu. He didn't say made bitzam. He said made beitzim. He said egg whites, egg yolks. If you use eggs as like we call egg matzah or egg challah instead of water, then that's not machshel kabel tama. So that's what he said. He said made beitzim. And they thought they misheard him because he wasn't clear, and they thought he said made bitzam kamar. And Vito Nami Baha, and they also made a mistake in the following Mishnah. May Kremyon and May Figa. This is a Mishnah that we have in Masechta Para, and it says May Kremyon and May Figa. These two bodies of water, Kremyon and Figa, or two lakes or rivers, Psulin, they're puzzle to use for the Efer Para, for the water that you're going to use to make the Para Aduma water. You're not allowed to use water from these two places because they're water from a marsh, and they thought that you see, the fact that they're not kosher for meipara means they're not really water, and if they're not really water, they're not going to be machshir l'kabel tama. The inu savar I just said this out. The inu savar, they thought midul gabe chatas psili, since it's usher for mei chatas for paraduma water, achshuri namile machshiri doesn't make machshir l'kabel tama. And it's not so. Hasan in chatas bin mayim chayim. Over there for chatas, you have a pasuk that says you need mayim chayim el keli, spring water to the keli, and that's why it's no good, because marsh water is not spring water. But hachach shuri koldu machshiri, over here to be machshir to something from kabel tuma koldu machshiri, any liquid water is machshir, and therefore Tana, we learned, Gazru, in that time they made a gzera. Talmud al yara elam kenet l'rishus rabbi. Talmud cannot paskin unless he gets rishus from his rabbi. Tanchum breder of Ami ikla l'chasar. Tanchum the son of Rav Ami came to Chasar.
Their place,
yeah. Darashlu, and he darshan to them, mutter lil says chitin v'Pesach. You're allowed to go and soak wheat, a little tiny bit in water, on Pesach after you crush it. Because what they would do is they would crush it and then they would cook it or bake it right away, so it wouldn't become chametz. But the chashash is maybe it will become chametz very quickly. He said, no, if you do it this way, that's very, very quick, you're allowed to do it. So Amr Lai, they told him, Lav Rav Mani de Mensur Ikahacha, isn't Rav Mani of de Mensur over here? Betanya, we learned in a brayso, Talmud al Yera Halacha B'Makam Rabbi. A Talmud should not pass in halacha in the place where his Rebbe is. Elam Kini Rach Menu Shalash Parsais Keneged Machne Yisrael, unless he was 3 parsa away from his Rebbe, like Machne Yisrael. Because if not, it's a chutzpah. Who are you to pass in front of your Rebbe? The Gemara says, he answered, he told him, I didn't realize, I just Pasha didn't realize that my Rebbe was there, otherwise I wouldn't have paskin. What's this word with the Machne Yisrael? The pasuk says that whenever the Yidden had a question, they would go to Moshe Rabbeinu to ask the question. Why did they go to Moshe Rabbeinu? Why didn't they go to someone else who was closer? And Machne Yisrael was 3 parsais wide. So that means they would go, if someone was all the way in the edge of the Machne, he would schlep 3 parsais to go to Moshe's tent to ask him a shayla. Right. And still it says that in the Machne they would go and ask Moshe. Right? So the answer is because it was a chutzpah for the people in the Machne to go paskin in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu when they were that close. And that's why, and from there you learn that a Talmud can't paskin halacha in front of his Rebbe within 3 parsais. Now we have a new story. Rav Chia saw a person that was standing in the Beis HaKvaros. Amar Lei, he told him, Lav ben Ish Pliny Kayanata, aren't you Yankel the Kayan's son? Like he recognized him. Aren't you Yankel the Kayan's son? And if so, why are you in Beis HaKvaros? Amar Lei, he said, you're right, I am so-and-so's son. Ab Avua Dahu Gavra, my father, Gvainayim Hava, he would follow his eyes. Nasan Eina Begrusha, he saw a grusha, decided he wanted to marry her. He made me, his son, a halal.
There was no vayamai in that.
There was no vayamai, and therefore he was allowed to be in a basic verse because a halal does not have the surim of a kain. Now, I just want to go back a little bit over here because Rashi has a whole arichas, and Tosfos also says it I'm sorry. First, I'm going to say a different thing. Tosfos says, which is very interesting. Tosfos says that he doesn't understand what's this mistake of B'tzaim and Beitzim. They're not similar, right? Right. So Tosfos has a different Beitzim that it's. I'm sorry. I would say next Tosfos. I'm sorry. Tosfos says that what's the problem with Kremyon and the other river, Figa. He said that you have more in Brav Basra, it's mashma that they're rivers. If they're a river, then it's not a marsh, it's not a swamp. What's the problem? So he says that their svara was that because this water is muddy, swamp water, marsh water tends to be muddy, right? So it's muddy water. They held you take a keli and you put muddy water in it, then you have it's a chatzitza between the water. If there's mud between the water and the keli, like it sticks on the side, then it's not mayim chayim el keli. By the meichatas it has to be mayim chayim el keli. They said it's a chatzitza, and that's why it's going to be pasul in what do you call it, in meichatas, which means that it had no shaykhs whatsoever to the halacha that they were extrapolating from it, that it should be okay to be it should not be machshir l'kalatam. Okay, that's one thing. Now, another thing is that Rashi brings down a whole arichas over here, and I think the other Rishonim and Tosfos also brings it down, that this second story over here of Rav Chia, who saw this person that was in the basic forest, it wasn't Rav Chia. That a Gersa, and from the Yishalmi it seems like that also, that it was Rebbe also. And the story was that Rebbe saw both these stories. Rebbe was in a town that was in Akai. Akai, I remember from Gittin, I believe, is half in Eretz Yisrael and half in Bavel. And okay. And Rebbe saw in the Eretz Yisrael part that they weren't being careful with being Makabel Tumah on the kneading the dough, and then he went into the Bavel side, and Bavel is the Rabbanon were Geyser Tumah al Eretz Ha'amim, like being the Beis HaKvaros, so the Kohen shouldn't have been there. And that's why he said the story with the Kohen, and he saw both these stories, and he said, this is why a Talmud shouldn't be paskin unless he has rishus from his Rebbe. Okay. Gemara says like this. Pshita, it's never pashat. Lapalga, if a Rebbe wants to give Rishus to his Talmud only to paskin for some stuff, then he can do that. Hakamin Mahani. We said it works, right? Because Rebbe said to Rav that he could be Yoyreh, he said he could be Yadin, but he said he can't be Ater B'chiris. So you see that a Rebbe could say, this is right to paskin in, and this is not right to paskin in. But the question is, Al Tanai Mai. Can he give a Tanai? Can he say, I want to give, the Rebbe can say, I give you Rishus to paskin for a year.
Year or two,
Yeah. Or that would be one Tanai, or it could be other Tanais. So what's the halacha? Mai? Are you as a Rebbe? Can Rebbe do that? Tashma, bring your riot. I'm Rabbi Yechanan Rav Shimon. Rabbi Yechanan said to Rav Shimon, "Arei anta b'rishuseinu ashatavi etzleinu." You're in our rishus. In other words, you have rishus from us to paskin until you come back. In other words, he was saying, while you're away, I'm giving you rishus. When you come back, we're going to reevaluate. There's the Meiri. That's how Rashi learns. The Meiri learns a little different shot. He said, "B'rishuseinu, harei anta b'rishuseinu." You have rishus from us to tell other people that they can paskin. So you can give rishus, like you can be a proxy, a shliach for me, Rabbi Yechanan, to give other people rishus, but only until you come back. Not after that. After that, we're going to reevaluate. So that is a raya. The Gemara says that Tanai works also. So that's the Gemara weiter. Gufu we learned. Now we're going a little bit away from these halachas of rishus and back to the halachas that we had on Daf Gimel, Daf Dal, but Daf Gimel really, Dinim Amnas B'Shleisha. How many people do you need for a bestin? Gufu, we learned, Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, Shnayim Beish Adanu, two people who did a din, dineim din, their din is a din. Ella Shenikru Nikra Bestin Chatzef, they're called a Bestin Chatzef. They should have three. That's the Rav Nachman Karmel Ashmaita. Rav Nachman came, it was sitting, and he said this halacha from Shmuel. Eisver Rav Nachman, Rava asked the kasha from Nachman like this. He brought down a Mishnah later on. We're going to see it, in about 20 blot. Afilu shnayim mezakna shnayim mechayvin ve'achad omer ein yedea yesifu adiyanin. This Mishnah says that even if two of the dayanim, you have a din, and there's three dayanim, and two people say he's chayiv, and two people say he's pater, and the third one doesn't say the other way, he says, I don't know. He didn't give a psak. He didn't say what it is. Where it says you don't have a full din over here. One of them doesn't know. So therefore, the Mishnah says yesifu dayanim. You should add on to the dayanim. V'i isa, and if it's true,
how many? One, two?
I would assume two because you want to keep it. You want to keep it. No, you want to keep it. You can't have a beis shekel.
Right, you can't have a beis shekel.
Right.
So you on two, so you have five. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So the Gemara says, what do you see from here? You see that if you have three dayanim and one is not being a dayan, he says he doesn't know. So now you have two left. You have to add on more dayanim. Wait a second. If you're adding on more dayanim, why do you have to add on more dayanim? According to Shmuel, two people who judged, dineim din el shenikru beis l'chatzav. So say, fine, you don't have three, but you have two over here. So if you have two, now we know what the psak is. The Gemara says, V'isa, if Shmuel is correct, lahavu k'shnayim shadanu, it should be like two people who judged. Where it says, Shani Hasam there is different. Why? The Meikara adaited klasi yisivi. Over there they sat down to have judgment by three. Hacha lav adaited klasi yisivi. Over here they didn't sit down to have judgment by three. They sat down to have judgment by two. So it's different. Eisvei. So he asked another kasha on Shmuel's halacha. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer hadin b'shleisha u'pshara b'shnayim. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says dinim amanis is three dayanim. Pshara, a compromise, is with two dayanim. The yafa koyach pshara mikoyach hadin.
Pshara means after you down the case, then you decide whether you can make pshara or not. When you sit down to judge it, you have to have a best. Pshara is you make a deal, $100.
Pshara is you sit down beforehand and you tell Bezdin, hey, we want to make pshara.
They themselves the one have go with the pshara.
Yeah. So it's not that Bezdin came, we have a bright idea, let's have a pshara. So Rav Shimon Gamliel says pshara needs two people. The yafa koyach pshara v'koyach hadin. and the pshara is stronger than din. Why? If two people were the judges, the baldinim could say, this is not a good din Torah because there's only two people and they can be chayzer. But if two people made a pshara, ain't baldinim yachal nachzben. They can't be chayzer.
Because they can't to make a pshara.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So now, what do you see from here? You see that for din shnayim shadanu, the baladinim kachal nachzben, and according to Shmuel, shnayim shadanu dineim din. So here you have a Fersha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that says that it's a brisa that says that not like Shmuel. V'chi tema, the Gemara says on the top of the page. V'chi tema, pliga Rabbanan leid Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is a das yachid, and really the Rabbanan hold that two people are good dayanim. It's not true. Vam Rabbi Vo shnaim shadanu divrei kol indinei din. Rabbi Vo said, and we have this brought down before, that two people who were judges, everyone agrees that the din is not a din. If everyone agrees the din is not a din, then you see that Shmuel is wrong. And then there's no das yachid, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is not a das yachid with Rabbanan arguing. Zak the Gemara, Gavra Karamis, you're bringing a kasha from Rabbi Vo onto Shmuel. Shmuel would say no. The Rabbanan do argue with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is a das yachid, and the Rabbanan paskin the shnayim shadanu is dinei and din el shenikru doesn't chatzav, and that is Daf Hey.